Hey guys, all right, today we are back with a today we are back with another Geography Now video. This time hitting up Australia. So, yeah. Let's learn about the former penal colony of Britain.
All right, everybody, let's just all get it off of our chests. Koalas and kangaroos, boomerangs, didgeridoos, Sydney, Melbourne, Uluru, crocodiles, cockatoos, everything that will kill you. Shrimp on Barbies, that's not true. That Vegemite stuff that tastes like poo. Coral reefs and platypuses. Platypi. What's the plural of platypus? All right, now let's actually learn about the freaking country.
No, let's do that like 5 more times.
To learn geography now!
Hey everybody, I'm your host Paul Barbado. Today's gonna be Australia. You know the drill. Let's dissect the flag.
Yay, flags! Oh, yeah.
The Australian flag has a blue field with a Union Jack on the upper hoist corner to represent that it was a former colony and a current Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, with a large star under it representing the Commonwealth, and the 5 stars on the right, the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Crucis, to the right representing the Southern Cross constellation.
Sure,
All right,
I totally know that.
was fun. Now let's discuss about the borders.
Sounded like he wasn't too excited about that flag. I think Paul felt that was a pretty boring flag. And you know what, I agree with Paul.
Now, obviously, as an island nation, or rather large one, but still an island, Australia doesn't have any borders with any other nations, but
Island
that doesn't
continent.
mean that Australia doesn't have some rather intriguing parameters. The country divides itself up in a rather intriguing way. Like the US, Australia has states, not provinces. There is a difference. 6 of them, and each one kind of has their own little flair and quirks, like Tasmania, known for being crazy. Where things get a little interesting, though, are
I wish he would explain the difference between states and provinces. Maybe he does that in a different video. Maybe he explained it in the past and I completely forgot. I honestly don't really know much of a difference. Does state just have more autonomy? That's just based off my head. That's what it sounds like.
are the territories. Australia has 3 domestic internal territories and 6 overseas territories. Technically 7 if you include the Australian Antarctic Territory, even though the Antarctic Treaty kind of bans anybody from claiming Antarctic soil as their own, which we will find out in future episodes that a lot of countries do a wonderful job at ignoring. The 3 internal territories are Northern Territory, Capital Territory, which is basically just the capital city of Canberra and some extra space around it, and the confusing little tyke Jervis Bay Territory. Jervis Bay was bought and developed to give the inland capital Canberra access to the sea, and eventually Jervis Bay split from the capital. However, it's still counted as part of the capital in elections. It's a little confusing.
What the fuck, Australia? That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Even though it really doesn't have much going for it, except for a small navy base and beaches that it kind of took from other neighboring
What the fuck, Australia?
towns. The most dramatic border area, though, would have to be the middle of Australia. For years, this slab of land didn't exactly quite know how to distinguish itself and has gone through 4 transitions in the past century. First,
Damn.
it was all South Australia, which didn't quite make sense because parts of it touched the northern parts of Australia.
Yeah.
So it split into 2, 1 state and 1 territory. Then for 4 years, it became South Australia and 2 territories, the new one being called Central Australian Territory. Then finally, it changed its mind and went back to being Northern Territory. Central Australia
Jesus Christ, Australia.
is kind of like your girlfriend at a restaurant. What do you want?
I don't
What
know.
do you want? It's not that simple! Finally, we reached
Sounds about right.
the overseas territories. Although Australia has over 8,000
I'm gonna... What? That's a lot of goddamn islands.
islands under its sovereignty, 6 of these islands operate as distinct territories, some of which sustain themselves with permanent populations. They are Ashmore and Cartier, the Cocos or Keelings Islands, Coral Sea Islands, the Heard and McDonald Islands, and the popular holiday spot, Norfolk Island, and the pleasant Christmas Island that gets attacked by huge coconut crabs every year.
What the fuck? What the fuck are coconut crabs? Those look like they could kill you.
Finally, Australia
They look like fucking spider crabs. Fuck, no.
is home to arguably the most micronations in the world. Places like the Principality of Wye, Rainbow Creek, the Empire of Atlantium, and
What? Empire... Huh?
more. These nations were developed by either small groups of people or a single person because they were doing things like protesting taxes and wanted to claim autonomy,
Oh.
or they were just kind of bored and decided to amuse themselves. But still, hey, they tried. All right, now let's talk about the landscape, shall we? Okay, not all of Australia is a desert, okay? Only about 35%. Okay, so besides Antarctica,
Really? Only 35% of that is desert? From space, it looks more than 35.
Australia is the driest continent on the planet, which explains why, yes, 85% of the population lives along the edges of the country within 50 kilometers of the coast. Nonetheless, a lot of places, specifically around the coasts, actually have very temperate and even tropical landscapes. By the north, you find tropical zones and wetlands and rainforests. By the far edges on the east and west, you can find subtropical zones with lighter forests and plains. A little bit inland, close to the interior, you find grasslands and flat stretches of semi-arid terrain. In the
Expect that.
southeast by Sydney, you find temperate, cooler, arid land with semi-tropical yet
Looks like middle, looks like a United States forest.
slightly dry areas with an abundance of trees and plants. Then, of course, you have Tasmania, which is on a completely different level of green. Then we reach the deep interior, where we hit the Great Deserts like the Great Victoria and the Great Sandy Deserts. This area is famously
Creative name, Great Sandy Desert. A desert is made out of sand. I guess technically, I don't think a desert is made out of sand. I think a desert is a desert's technical definition. How much rainfall it gets? I don't know.
known as the Outback. The Outback is essentially the area of Australia with long open stretches of red and orange desert that lays out beyond the horizon with few sparse populations of people that can be found anywhere. It has a dry, rocky, rugged terrain that everybody assumes is teeming with a variety of poisonous insects and reptiles, and, well, I mean, it kind of is, but still, there's more to it than just that.
No. If there's a thing that can kill me, fuck that place. I'm lucky where I live, where I don't really have... I think there's maybe one spider in this area that could kill me, but it's very rare, and I have never seen one. And I think it's a burrowing spider? I think it's the kind of spiders that, like, dig into the ground. Is that the kind of spider that we have here? In the Midwest? I don't know. I just know we don't have snakes. We have garden snakes. I've never seen a garden snake, though. No way, yes I have. I have seen a couple snakes. By the river, though. Is there anything else? No, I live in a good... Only thing that can kill me are tornadoes. And I guess fires. But fires are more... not human-caused, if it's gonna happen. Not weather-caused, or Mother Nature-caused.
Oh, and don't forget Lake Hillier, that strange lake that is mysteriously naturally pink for some strange reason that baffles scientists. Now, if there's one thing that really epitomizes Australia, it would have to be its world-renowned beaches and coasts. People flock from all over the world just to enjoy the beautiful, pristine atmosphere of a real, authentic Australian beach. Just remember to put on your sunscreen, though. Australians actually kind of have a joke where they can tell who the ignorant tourists are. It's usually the ones who think they'll be totally fine sitting out in the sun for more than 20 minutes. Skin cancer rates are actually exceptionally high in Australia, and the population has acknowledge the precautions that they need to take. Now, we all know that Australia is home to some of the most unique and curiously distinct animal species in the world not found anywhere else. However, Australia is also known as the home of many feral species. Australia has over 50 invasive species that were brought over to the land from areas mostly in Europe.
Okay, I've heard about the bunny invasive species.
And over the course of nearly 1.5 centuries have bred and spread like wildfire all over the country. Animals like the European rabbit, red fox, water buffaloes, goats, pigs, even camels, and worst of all, the famous cane toad. They've all gone wild and have cost the Australian government billions of dollars in environmental damages. Yeah, I don't really know how to transition into the demographics from this part, so here's demographics. Today, Australia has a population of about 23 million people. Now, to many outsiders, Australia is kind of known as the place where the British sent their prisoners. Yes. First of all, that's rude. Second of all, that's only, like, kind of half true. Yes, during the early years of Australia's colonization from the UK, droves of convicts were sent to penal colonies.
Mainly because the United States declared independence. And so now the British didn't have a place to send their prisoners. So now they had to send them somewhere else, and they chose Australia.
In Botany Bay, which is now in present-day Sydney, over 165,000 convicts, about 25,000 of which were women, were sent over the course of 80 years. Although the British weren't the first ones to discover Australia, it was actually the Dutch. As they came, they named the land New Holland and the adjacent island next door, New Zealand, after the province of Zeeland in the Netherlands. However, as we'll soon discover, the Dutch were really good at discovering places, but kind of not so good at colonizing and maintaining those places for themselves. themselves. However,
Yeah.
most of Australia's population came from natural colonization from British non-convict nationals. Some would argue that Australia was kind of like the UK's version of Operation Backup Plan in case of America goes crazy. After the
Fair.
American Revolution, the UK tried to compensate for lost colonies by re-establishing new ones, and Australia was hot on the list. About 85% of the population is European. Asians make up the next largest minority of about 12%, mostly coming from China and India and other Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. And by the way, yes, Australia does have black people, not many, but before the Federation began, Africans, mostly from sub-Saharan countries like South Africa, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, and Sudan, have historically resided in Australia. It wasn't until the 60s when African assistance programs allowed many Africans to study and eventually move to Australia. Today, they make up about 1% of the population. One demographic of people that commonly gets overlooked, though, would have to be the native Australians,
Yes.
commonly known as
Pretty much in every single colonized nation, the native population dies off and is then forgotten about.
the Aborigines, which make up about 3% of the population. Aborigines are a very unique and distinct people group that come from hundreds of different tribes, each with their own language and dialect, spread throughout the north, south, and central regions. Today, Aboriginal rights are a huge hot-button topic in Australian legislation, and about 22% of the land of northern Australia is Aboriginal-owned. In 2013, Aboriginal groups actually banded together and decided to kind of make their own little state called the Murruwarri Republic, independent from Australia. The Australian government, though, doesn't really recognize this claim and just kind of brushes it off with a meh, as long as you don't cause a civil war attitude. Well, as you can see, a lot of people
You know what? That's a fair response. It sounds kind of a lot like maybe the relationship between the United States and the native tribes in their sanctuaries. That sounds like the relationship there a little bit. Maybe less. I think the tribes have a bit more autonomy though than the Murruwarri Republic, from what it sounds like. But it kind of also sounds like that Australian government kind of lets them do whatever the hell they want. So as long as they just don't, cause a civil war.
people have come to live in Australia, but now let's see how Australia interacts with the rest of the world. Australia is, let's just put it very simply, a very popular country. If this was high school, Australia would be on the top of the social ladder, hands down. Everybody knows something about Australia. When it comes to friends, though, Australia not only goes for the cool kids, but also the strategic ones. Of course,
United
Australia gets
States.
along with many of its Asian neighbor nations.
Yeah, the Chinese relationship, I think, at least especially within the last couple years, since this video is older, maybe it was different back then, but I think specifically recently, the relationship with China has gotten a bit iffy.
Specifically China and India, as large numbers of people from those nations live in Australia, and they do great business with them as well. Australia gets along pretty well with the islands of Oceania, except Fiji. In 2006, Australia refused to back up a military coup that overthrew the government in Fiji, and since then,
What the fuck, Fiji?
things have been a little weird between the two countries. In terms of their best friends, though, of course, New Zealand would have to rank in the top level, and they are basically like siblings that share a very similar culture.
That also hate each other, though. I know the internet. I see the fucking messages that go back into what Australians call the New Zealanders and what the Kiwis call the Aussies. I fucking see that shit.
Culture, language, and histories as former colonies, whereas the UK also has a high priority on Australia's entourage as they make up the largest demographic of people ethnically and as migrants in the country. But finally, we reach the USA. The USA and Australia kind of have a little crush on each other. Australia is always there to back up the US in times when allies are necessary, and the US, well, I mean, we Americans, we just love Australians. We love their accents, we love their culture, we love their accents, we love their spunky Australian attitude, and we love their
mainly the
sexy,
attitude.
sexy accents. Almost any Australian that comes to the US is immediately loved and welcome, even if they are slightly sociopathic. One sentence with that accent and we are smitten. We love
Yeah.
you, Australia. In conclusion,
No, it's true. But also, I think this strong relationship between the United States and Australia really comes from World War II, in which obviously the United States was more I would argue probably more helpful in defending, once they were in the war, in fighting against the Japanese than the British were up until Germany was defeated. That's because I think there was also that situation where there was an Australian army unit or something fighting in Africa, but then there was a threat of invasion from Japan, and the Australians wanted to send those troops back home so that they could defend their homeland. And I think Churchill was denying it. And I don't know if they eventually got those boys back home as a precaution, or if it was the Americans that pressured Britain into allowing the Australian soldiers to get sent back home. Can't remember. I heard this online somewhere from like a Australian like history guy online. So my memory could be wrong, but from what I remember, that's what it was.
Australia is just, everybody loves Australia. Stay tuned. Austria is coming up next.
All right, that was Geography Now, Australia. I hope you guys enjoyed. I have nothing here to add. I think this was a good summary of I think this was a good video for Australia. I think this was a good time limit for Australia. As you guys know, in the past, like with Afghanistan, I think there are times when he could talk longer on certain things, but these early videos are shorter. I think this is one of those videos where I don't think he needs to go back and revisit and add more, because I think I think the only thing that he could cover maybe is a bit more on the relationship between the indigenous Australian people, the Aborigines, and the British descent Australians. Kind of talk more about that relationship, I think, would be cool. But aside from that, I think everything else was pretty well covered. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.